can I ask you all just to give Nomndeni a big, big round of applause as she comes up?
Okay, I don't have a... Where's the light? Sanibonani. I'm not great with keynote addresses, so I'm gonna keep looking at my phone to take cues, but I'll do my best to actually tell a story. Thank you to everyone who's here, who is from my community. If you don't know about my community, you'll find out about my community today, and thank you, Nozi, for inviting me to your stage. My name is Nomndeni Mdakhi. I am the CEO and founder of a media and marketing business called Agenda Woman. Am I audible? Yes. You guys can hear me properly? I'm gonna get louder as I get more confident, so stay with me. I started Agenda Woman as a call to resolve some of the challenges that I've had navigating being a woman and being a businesswoman and being a working woman. I've been an entrepreneur now for 13 years, I had to count, because I think I stopped counting at 12, it's been 13. So it feels like Tobani's 28-year-old story I've lived. Legends, very movie-like story I've also lived. And I couldn't have chosen any other life except the life that I have. The work that I do particularly is focused on creating content and experiences for women that gives them the confidence to own their future. So I often get asked, why confidence? I think we all can agree that success accelerates when you're confident. And when you're not confident, you fall into fear. And when you are fearful, you are very afraid of acting. I think we often find ourselves in those parallels, right? You're either very confident and you show up at work and you do what you need to do, or you're very fearful and you choose the back seat in the room. So today, because I like to contextualize and structure things, I studied marketing, and I'm always anchored on insights. And in speaking, I actually read a book around TED Talks. I love reading books about how to give proper conversations, because my story is so long. I'm 38 years old. I have kids who are 17 and 15, so so much has happened. So every time I give a talk, I try and just stick to 3 points and anchor those points around a particular piece of my story. But it's such a long story, which is weaved with such amazing moments and the lowest of the lows. So I'm going to focus on 3 narratives today. The first one will be a story on the art of unspoken conversations and how those unspoken conversations can anchor your confidence. The second piece is going to be about the power of your internal conversations. It's so funny. I was saying to Tobani, everything I'm going to say you've heard already from both Tobani and Legend. And maybe my story might contextualize it differently, but really success leaves clues. And if you pay attention, you really will be able to get to where you need to go. And then the last part of my story is going to be the power of the conversations around you. So the first piece of the story, I'm going to tell you about how I got to work with one of the most impactful mentors in my life. I'm going to try and tell stories I haven't told, but this one I think I've told a couple of times. If you're within my community, you would have heard it. So in 2009, I started my first business, which was a DJing school for girls. I didn't realize how passionate I was about women, but in hindsight, I recognize now that everything that's happened has led me to the business that I have today. We started a DJing school for girls with a friend I grew up with, DJ Zintle. I left my work in 2008. I just had my second child, a boy called Ulwandle. And I was feeling extremely unfulfilled. I just felt like I don't belong where I was. And I was 25. I was crazy. I was ambitious. I was bold. After my maternity leave, I came back to work. I tried to navigate, the space and figure out, how do I become part of the executive decisions? You see how crazy I was. I'm thinking, I'm junior here. I'm thinking, hey, I want to speak to Adrian Gore, because I worked at Discovery at the time. And when I recognized that I would have to take 10 years to get there, it was good enough incentive for me to leave. I had no idea what I was doing, but I always say I worked for 2 seconds. I worked for a year, I think, at MultiChoice, and another year at Discovery Health, and then I left. I started that DJing school. When we started the school, I remember the first day when we opened, and we waited for the phone to ring. It literally reads like a movie sometimes. But you know, we had worked so hard to get to the point where we had found the house. It actually started with Zinhle just telling me about, you know, her experience at Soul Candy, where she had studied DJing, and how many men were in the room, and how often she did not feel confident enough to ask questions, because she was generally a person who did not have the confidence that she has now then. And she wanted to create a space where women could come and learn, and they could learn much more freely. But of course, we also had this idea of just, you know, studying a business. I didn't know I was an entrepreneur then. I can tell you for free now that all I will ever do my entire life is be an entrepreneur. We started the school. It was an amazing experience. At the time, she had a slot on YFM where she had a show. I can't remember the name of the show, Feminine Touch, on Mosquito's show. So every Saturday we would go to the show, and we would talk about the school. One of the things I quickly recognized was I need to identify my space in this room. I grew up in a small town called Newcastle, but I'm also from Natal. I grew up from a small town called Newcastle. I grew up in a Christian home. So I knew the song Sweetie Lavo, but I didn't know Mosquito. I didn't know his power. I didn't know the pop culture space and what that looked like. So essentially, when I walked into that room, I was lucky that I didn't have that feeling of overwhelm because, oh my gosh, I'm with these people, in a way that worked for me in so many ways. So I meet Mosquito. We are at the show every Saturday talking about the school. I can't remember the day, but I know that I made a decision that I was going to differentiate myself from everyone here. One of the decisions I made was I would never get blonde hair, because artists are more likely to get blonde hair. Zinhle, I think, had a hairstyle that was purple at some point. I was like, I will never look like that. I was very intentional about how I dressed. I remember at the time, I took Michelle Obama's archetype, and I said I will always show up like this in this environment. And that is how I'm going to be memorable. And that is how I'm going to command respect before I say anything when I walk into the room. I can tell you for free, that has been one of the most powerful moves I made in that space. I was always seen as the business mind. No one expected me to be exciting and fun. No one expected me to be on stage. But everyone knew that when they came to me, they were going to talk about business. Now, this goes back to what I started by framing, you know, this topic when I said, there's a power in unspoken conversations. Everywhere you are, you're speaking. When you greet a person, nuances of culture. I know that one of the things I do consistently, when I shake someone's hand, it's always going to be a hard handshake. And when I'm in rooms with particularly white men, and I'm going to put it that way, I always get a response. That's a conversation starter, and I haven't even said anything. There is so much power in unspoken conversations and understanding the cues that you need to bring into every encounter. After I positioned myself in this way, in front of Mosquito, I remember we were not making a lot of money, and Zinhle was like, we need to figure out how to make money. I'm going to get the DJing gigs, but we need to figure out what you're going to do. And I think you need to help Mosquito structure Galawa. What you'll be surprised by is how many organizations are big, but there is no organization. There's a powerful brand, there's bar leader, but is there an operational system? Many numbers on Instagram, but is there a business? So one of the problems that they had at the time, I remember Zinhle saying, Nomndeni, we don't know what we're doing half the time here at Galawa. I don't know where my contract is. Mosquito's all over the place. Please help him process, create operations, and structure this business. From doing Fuse Academy, which didn't really make me a lot of money, I had the opportunity to learn that I could do that. One day, I wake up, I know Mosquito now, not very close to him, you know, I'm the girl that comes in, I always have the laptop. If there's a question, I make sure I'm the one who has the answers. I make sure I don't feed information to anyone, I'm holding on to all the answers because I need to be the person that has the answers. That's my position. I can't DJ, I can't sing, I don't have 1 million followers, I need to know what my power is. And my power in that room was having answers. One day I wake up and I say, you know, I'm going to give this a shot. I remember I used to stay in Midrand, not a fan of the place, but I did stay there. Wake up in the morning, I sent a message to Mosquito and I say, make me your PA. Now I must say, I had worked at Discovery, and at MultiChoice. But I knew there was no structure where I was going, so I needed to find the gateway. I said, make me your PA. He responded and he said, why? And I said, because you need the help and I need the money. He said to me, let's talk. We go to Durban. They had South African Music Conference at the time. I remember at the end of one of the days we drove around, he says to me, so what are you saying? And I said, make me your PA. And he said, okay, this is what I do. He goes through a couple of things and he says, but I only have 3,000 rands. Mind you, I know how much he charges an hour. He says to me, I'll pay you 3,000 rands. I said to him, okay, because I knew there was no way I was going to corporate. And if I had 3,000 rands, I would do something with it. I walked into his office the following Monday. He scribbled a piece of paper. I have DJing, which is an entertainment company. I have Galawa Jasmine, which is a record label. I have Madlozi, which is a content business. I have 2 construction companies, but don't worry about those. These are the only 3 businesses you're going to need to help me with. And then he doesn't know what to say to me. Because the irony of it all is he had never trusted anyone enough to bring them that close. Because of all the times I went to YFM prepared with all the answers, dressed in a particular way, addressing him in a particular way, there was a conversation that was taking place. So I was very lucky in that I do have a structured way of thinking. I said to him, go to the shops, get me files that are going to represent these businesses. And I put together, his office was a mess. I put together, some filing. And here's the thing, I also knew that I could do more than a PA, but I didn't care about the title. I needed to get into the room. And when I was organizing those pieces of paper, it never dawned on me that it could be looked at as something that is trivial because I knew I had a plan. I finished that. I said to him, give me access to your emails. That very first month, we were able to secure a deal with Network BBDO and 3 ships for 300,000 rands. And he said to me, I'll give you 10%. I never got that 3,000 rands. There's something powerful about how you decide to show up and the conversation that's taking place because of the things that you don't say, but the way you stand, the way you speak, the way you're honest, the way you dress, the intention behind it all has a conversation that's been going on with people who you might need something from at a later stage. I'm going to stop that story there. But what I want you to always remember is that you can live your life at your own terms. Intentionality is a big part of the work that I do. But I'm going to move to the next story, which is the power of the conversations that you have with yourself, the internal conversations. So in 2010, I started an agency, a marketing consultancy called Edis Communications. After I felt like Mosquito was going to drive me nuts, I thought, okay, if I want to build a professional relationship with him where I am invoicing and I'm making money and I understand how much money I'm making, I'm going to start my own business. And I can see that there's other people here who I can service because the entertainment industry at the time did not have influencers. It wasn't really driven by a lot of celebrity endorsements. And I had marketing background and I saw the opportunity, so I structured my business. That business was built with the intent to only service that. Now I'm going to go into a journey with you, a little bit like what Legend has been through, because in a similar way, I was an ambitious young woman in the room with some of the most powerful people in the country, respected immensely by these people, and in a way I did not know that I thought I was invincible until I was defeated. So I start the agency, I'm doing well. Other people want to work with me, but they're kind of afraid of Mosquito, but Mosquito is paying me enough, so I don't really care. I am booking a trip to Brazil. When I wake up in the morning, I'm like, I feel like I'm going to Brazil today. So I think I'll book that trip. I remember I went to the Revolt Music Conference, which was done by Puff Daddy in 2014. And even making that decision, I think I made it like 3 days before that. And I was one of the first people that went to that conference. I remember the following year, Major League DJs, Slicker, Tammy, calling me and asking me how everything went. And at the time, I just thought, hey, if I want to thrive in music, let me see what the business of music looks like. I can't even tell you how much that trip cost me because money was not an object. I woke up one day and I said, I'm going to book a trip to Miami and I'm just going to go there and learn. I'm sharing this to contextualize where I was in my conversations with myself and how my ego became the loudest voice. And because my ego became the loudest voice, I neglected what the business needed from me. I became the business. I got a call one day from Spelile Mjadu, who is the head of PR at Unilever to this day. She handles about 12 beauty brands. This should have been around 2015. And she said to me, I met you when we did the event with DJ Tira. It was sponsored by X. We're looking for a black female-owned PR agency, and we would like you to come and present your credentials. I did not even know what that meant. I was a big fish in a small business pond. I was surrounded by big names, but I didn't know how to do business. So I slept at 3 a.m. preparing for that presentation because I am the kind of person that I want to walk into any room as prepared as I possibly can be. I did the presentation, I got the job, I became one of the PR agencies. I think I was the only black PR agency at the time for Unilever, and they gave me the Lux account. I remember we did some of the very early influencer campaigns at the time. We took, I think Mihlali was 19 at the time. I hired her to come into Durban during the Durban July. We had an amazing experience, but I still did not know how to run my business. I was getting a lot of revenue coming into my business, but I did not know how to manage it. I did not know how to negotiate with the big guys, and they will negotiate you down. And sometimes when you've forgotten really what you were meant to be doing, you will fight just to be in the room. When I took on the Unilever job, I negotiated down so much because it was about Nomndeni has a PR account with Unilever, but Nomndeni is getting paid 500 rands an hour. And my counterparts are getting paid 1,500 to 2,000 an hour. But all I cared about at the time was really fulfilling this need of this big ego that continued to grow. One day, I am in New York. I had been invited to moderate a conversation at the HBO building. Many, many things happened for me at that time. I met Drake. I met so many people who have continued to be in my life because I'm not going to go into detail, but essentially it's what Legend spoke about. At some point, you go back and you have to have these tough conversations, and you have to be honest and authentic about what conversations were you having with yourself that led you to make some of the decisions that you made. I was in New York, invited to moderate a conversation. The CEO of HBO was in the room. Russell Simmons was in the room. I remember when I finished, they came up to me and, of course, very impressed with the work that I had done. But there's a call I'd received this morning from back home. We were about to lose the biggest client that we had. But I got on stage and I did the work. Because that's what often happens with the people that we admire so much. We get on with it. But I want to tell you today that every single person in this room has a struggle that you don't know about. And that pedestal where you've elevated people, that is your seat. You are seeing yourself reflected in these people. The people that you elevate essentially have the characteristics that you want to have. But that is your seat. I think I'm going to move to my third story because I don't even remember the last point of what I wanted to say. But essentially, there is something very, very important about the conversations that you have with yourself. And honesty that you need to develop around what is actually happening in your life. I got so consumed with my conversation with my ego that I forgot to speak to the people that were in my kitchen cabinet, where the work needed to happen. I was making decisions to completely fulfill my ego. So watch out for that conversation that you're having with yourself. The last part of my conversation is the power of the conversations around you. It's ironic, when I wrote this, these three parts of this conversation, I didn't realize how much they were so anchored in my journey through my three businesses. The first part was Fuse Academy, the second part was Edis Communications, which was my marketing consultancy, and this part is really about the work that I'm doing now with Agenda Woman. Agenda Woman is anchored on 5 pillars that I discovered when I found a study that was done by Cantor on self-esteem. I had always had these feelings around what my experience was like, but because now I'm a business person, I had to figure out what the commercial aspect of this conversation was going to be. Because people like myself and Tobani and Legend are emotional leaders, right? We lead with our hearts. What I've had to learn now that I'm 38 is that there's my emotions, then there's the job that the business needs to do. Now, my feelings were, I wish I needed support. I wish I had support. I wish I had a community. I wish I could have called someone when I made that decision. Maybe I would have made a different decision. These are all my emotions, but how do I go to Veuve Clicquot and say, give me money for this event that I need to do because this is how every woman is feeling? That's not the language of brands. The language of brands is, there's a study that was done by Kantar in the UK, and they found that these are the contributors to self-esteem. So essentially, when I found that study, it really anchored a lot of how I was feeling in my own journey as a woman in the business space. The 5 pillars, the 5 contributors to self-esteem, which I have now converted to confidence, were financial autonomy, women feeling like, if I have money, if I'm making money, if I know how to manage my money, if I know how to grow my money, I feel confident about the decisions that I need to make about my life. The second one was body autonomy, with women saying, I just want to feel like I own my body. It's okay now. And I'm going to contextualize that a little bit to how my experiences have been in business spaces. I remember one day I had a meeting that I was called to by a gentleman from London who was going to open a co-working space in South Africa. And I had seen it enough times to stop and think about what I'm going to wear that day, because I didn't want him to be attracted to me. I need every man in the room to understand that that's our process when we wake up in the morning. When we want to be taken seriously, we live in a world that doesn't give us autonomy around how we show up. There's a dialogue that's taking place about how I'm dressed before I step into the room. So when I saw this body autonomy story, I remembered that part for myself. The third part was freedom of speech, which essentially spoke about women saying, we really have social media and all of that, but if I say one thing and Legend says another thing, we're not going to be crucified the same way. Kanye West can have a rant and he'll get away with it, but Nozipho can't. Nozipho can't talk like Kanye West. The fourth pillar was access and visibility, where women said, if I don't see a woman doing that job, I'm not trying to be the first one. Because our confidence levels are different. Other people can jump, but a big number of women don't have that autonomy. And then the fifth one was social networks and connections, which I'm really, really passionate about, and our events are essentially about that. A lot of women saying, I have great ideas, but my circle doesn't get it. It's potentially the reason that all of you are here, to connect with like-minded people, to have your ideas validated, because maybe the people around you just don't get it. I've been very fortunate that I've been surrounded by really powerful men. And I've had maybe the luck to be heard. Maybe it was all that work I did in how I showed up, but I've been validated. And that sometimes blinded me to the reality of a lot of the women that I worked with, and sometimes even hired. Simple things like periods. I never struggled with that kind of stuff. I used to make my team cry because they had period pains. In a lot of ways, it's exactly what Legend is saying. When you live in the space where the only conversation that's happening is yours and your ego, you lose sight of what's happening around you. I was also a leader who made people cry. I remember there's a girl who came to my office after I'd done an event, and she cried probably for 30 minutes, and I just looked at her. And all that was happening, and the only thing that was happening in my head was, you're not going to make it if you're this weak. Everything that has happened for me has led me to do the work that I do today in Agenda Woman. In conclusion, I want to say, nothing gives me joy like fundamentally knowing that I hold the power to curate my life. You know, when you've hit the bottom and you've been able to come up, there's something magical that happens at the bottom. There's nothing that scares me now. The thing that I used to fear, my reputation being damaged, it's happened. Nothing scares me now. The only thing I live for is to be impactful, to do work that I love, to engage in spaces like this, which gives me tremendous joy, and to continue to share my story. One of the things that has been a powerful theory in me coming back to the work that I do now, and I mean, I could tell you stories about what happened, the nights where I couldn't sleep, the mornings where I couldn't wake up, the number of times I was in bed and I couldn't make breakfast for my kids, and I feared for my life. I always used to feel like my kids will talk about their mother as someone who was always in bed because I couldn't wake up. I couldn't wake up. When I count my blessings, making myself breakfast in the morning is at the top of the list. I came across a theory called the confidence-competence loop. And essentially, when you ask yourself, what do I do to get to where I need to go? The answer is just start. The answer is just start. This is how the confidence-competence loop works. To create confidence, you have to start something, and then you get feedback, and then you become confident, and then you start the next thing, and then you get feedback, and you continue to be confident. It's like doing great in maths. If you get that result that's like 90%, you suddenly believe that you are awesome in maths. If you give a good talk and you get good feedback, you suddenly believe you're good at talking. But you were never going to get the feedback if you didn't talk. So the only way to be confident in anything that you want to do is to just start. I promise you, you're not going to die. It might be uncomfortable. You'll cry a couple of times. You won't know who you are a couple of times. I still feel like that. I still have days where I have so much anxiety because the business that I'm building is a business model I've never seen. There is no business model in Africa for the business that I'm building. I can pick a little from TED Talks, I can pick a little from a production company, but there's no business model essentially for this puzzle that I'm building. And the only way I wake up every day and I build it is just by waking up every day and saying, what's the next thing that I can do? And sometimes it's just launching a newsletter. And then the data that comes from the newsletter shows me something else. One of the biggest insights that I learned this year from this business is how much my audience is career women and not entrepreneurs. All this time, I've been building this business on my story. But the more I did stuff, the more data came back. And now my primary target audience is working women. And you know what I love? They have money. So I'm going to stop there. There's many, many parts of my story that I could go into. But in essence, you have the power to create your life. Watch out for the conversations that are happening around you, inside you, the conversations that you're having without saying anything. And whatever you want to do, just start. Thank you.